Kia ora, welcome back. Great to have you guys back for the second series of Mind That Child. If you're tuning in, it means the first one wasn't too bad, so great to have you back again. Hey, if you saw the first one, I can't actually check up on you right now, but hopefully you did okay with the homework. When I mean do okay, I hope you did it. Because again, if you don't take something concrete away from these, it's just sort of a moderately entertaining 20 minutes. So we really want you to change your behaviour. So that's the idea of homework. So hopefully you're able to reflect on your family values and think about what those were and think about how your behaviour matched up with them. So session 2 on teens. This is a bit more of the nitty-gritty one. This is a bit more, it almost needs a safety warning, this one, because this is where we talk about some of the hard stuff, some of the stuff that really worries parents. So just a reminder, of course, they've only got half a brain, so go easy on them. So we're going to talk about some common challenges, right? We're going to talk about anxiety and depression. We're going to talk a little bit about self-harming. We're going to talk a little bit about social technology or social media, relationships, and risk-taking. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on each. And some of those will be relevant for you and some of those won't. But, you know, hopefully you'll be able to pick something up. So, anxiety and depression, really common. We know that throughout our lives, around sort of 1 in 4 of us will experience anxiety or depression. I've had a history of suffering from anxiety and have sort of slowly got better with that over time. But lots of us, so this is really common stuff, right? And the relevance for teenagers is often this is the time that these things first appear. Part of becoming an adult growing up, I guess, is starting to have real adult problems. And so here are some of the 2 biggies. So I've listed here some of the signs and symptoms of each. And we've sort of put them as overlapping, right? Because there is a bit of overlap with them. So, and I'm just giving you this information. Not trying to train you to be a psychologist and to work out, to sit there with a notepad and go, what's my daughter doing? Well, think she could be anxious. It's not the goal. It's just to give you a bit of information, a bit of data that you can use when you're thinking about your young person. And because these are commonly asked questions. What is anxiety? What is depression? So, anxiety, worry, fear, panic. That is like the anxiety bit, but people feel upset about that. They often imagine the worst. We call that catastrophizing, right? Where you think about the sort of the most catastrophic outcome of, and then you get worried that that's going to happen. And of course, teens aren't alone in this, right? Adults have this too. Upset stomach. Often when people get anxious, they find it difficult to eat. They might have some gastrointestinal problems. Crying, sleeping problems, appetite problems. So that's anxiety. Anxiety particularly, worry, fear, panic. Depression, sadness. That's the classic sort of thing you think of with depression, is like, oh, sad, crying all the time, can't get out of bed. That's true, that's part of it. The flip side of that, and interestingly for guys, the flip side is irritability. Grumpiness, irritability, and anger. Now, we can have debates about why men show anger and irritability more than they show sadness, but that's a whole other topic. For now, what we know, and it's enough to know, is that if you have a male, a boy adolescent, a boy teenager, and a sign of depression for them might actually be lots of grumpiness and irritability, more so than usual, more so that you would expect for most teenagers. And remember, they're probably going to be worst when they're at home, so. What else? Nothing's enjoyable when you're depressed. Things that used to be fun are no longer fun. I don't want to do that, it's just boring now. Low self-esteem, so you have a poor image of yourself. You don't think you're very good at anything, you think you suck. Loneliness, wanting to die, it's a very common symptom. Crying, sleep problems, appetite problems, and you can see how those are very much in common, overlap between the two. So, thinking about, because these are so common, we just think it's really useful for you to have some sense of what these things are and the difference between them. Okay, don't want you to be a psychologist, but you want to be equipped with some tools as a parent to do something right. So 3 sort of key principles really for if you're worried about your young person. Oh man, I don't know, maybe they are a little bit anxious, maybe they're a bit depressed. So the 3 N's: notice, name, navigate. So we're going to talk a little bit about each of those. Noticing, and that's partly the reason I gave you those lists, right? What do you notice? Now you're going to have to stop and actually pay attention for a moment to your young person. I'm talking about them like they're kind of like a pet. They're probably a vicious pet that doesn't like wearing a collar, perhaps. That might be a good example. But you're going to have to stop. Because again, thinking back to that automatic pilot, so much of our lives is lived just, get up, do this, come home, cook the dinner, off you go, do your homework. You might have to stop and just pay a little bit of attention. Just pause. Right? I'd encourage you to do this, and if you've got a partner, if there's 2 of you parenting, do it together. Once a week, once a fortnight, just have a little bit of a little whānau hui. And just reflect. It's only 5 or 10 minutes. How are the kids going? Oh yeah. Cool. Have you noticed anything different? Oh, I've noticed that whoever it is sleeping a lot more than usual. No, yeah. I've noticed he's really grumpy and irritable. Oh, maybe that's adolescence? It could be. So again, you don't want to jump on everything and go, oh my God, they might be depressed. Quick, get them off to the psychologist. They might just be an adolescent. So remember, last week we talked about the sort of founding principles of important to know what's going on in development. That's quite normal. But so just notice, though. What do you notice? And if you have any concerns, name them. Name them to the young person. Now what I'm not saying to you, go up to them and say, I think you might be depressed. I think you might have social anxiety disorder. You don't need to do that. You don't know. I don't know. I haven't seen them. But going back, just name what you've noticed. I noticed that you've been crying a lot. I noticed that you haven't been eating as much as usual. I noticed that you're spending much more time in your room. So you just see how you're just describing the behaviours? A way I like to think about this is observe and describe. Because people get all caught up in, what do we do? How do we approach this issue? Really worried about my young person, but I don't want to say anything I don't know what the words to say. Just observe and describe. What is it that you've seen and noticed? And then name it with them. Now, remember last week we talked about individuation. So individuation is that process whereby a young person steps out of their family, or tries to. They're in the process of stepping out of their family, rejecting you and everything you stand for. But they're stepping out of their family and they're trying to do things themselves. They're trying to be independent. So, I'm sure as you'll know if you've got teens already, you can't do this stuff for them. So, notice, name, and navigate. Navigate means together you work out what you're going to do. So this is something you do together. You can't say, right, you got to go up to the doctor, because they probably won't go, I'm not going to the doctor, I'm stupid. Or they won't, or they'll make an appointment, you'll make an appointment and they won't turn up. So, notice, name, navigate. Sometimes, and this is hard for us as parents, I know this for a fact. Yes, you've got to have small lips and big ears. You've got to zip that as much as you can and open these as much as you can. There's a tendency, isn't there? There's an undying tendency just to tell these stupid teenagers how it really is. Come on, this is what you got to do. Pull your socks up. We've got to go to the doctor. You've got to go and see a psychologist. Zip it as much as you can. People don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. And you might say, yeah, my kids know that I love them. But you need to show it in that moment. So, notice, name, small lips, big ears. Let them talk. An advantage here is that adolescents hate being socially awkward. Oh God, it's uncomfortable. Don't say it's embarrassing. So, just allow a little bit of space. Notice, name, and then leave the conversation open. They'll fill that space because it'll be so awkward not to. Because, oh my God, So you can use that to their advantage, right? They will say something, oh, I don't know, there's nothing wrong. Just allow them to speak. Try to keep yourself in control as much as possible. Don't respond. Again, just allow them to speak. And figure out together what you're going to do. If they don't feel great talking to you about it, who can they talk to about it? Is there somebody at youth that they can talk to? Is there somebody in your wider whānau that they can talk to? Is there somebody at school that they can talk to? So, navigate with them. And that's really hard, because this is you as a parent stepping out of a different phase of life. As a younger child, you used to do things for your kid, right? So individuation is as much about you as it is about them, because you have to let them go a little bit. I've got to take my hands off. It's like trainer wheels on a bike, right? You know, when they're little, they're learning to ride a bike, you just run along behind them. Don't fall off. No, I've got you. You know, better put my hands back on. Teenagers, you just got to take it off. You've got to take the trainer wheels off. Will they fall over? Probably. Will they graze their knee? Yep. But you can't save them from everything, and they need to go through that. So you are moving out of a phase as a parent from parenting middle-aged kids. I'm 40. I'm still living at home. If you've got a 40-year-old still living at home and you're parenting them, there's something very wrong. Middle childhood, 7 to 12-year-olds. You're stepping out of that period into being a teenager. It involves you changing, and that gets confusing for us as parents, right? Because we might have kids across the different developmental stages. We might have a teenager and an 8-year-old and a little one, and they all need different levels from us. So it's like, oh God, this is complicated. Anyway, teenagers, you need to navigate with them. You can't tell them how it is. They have to figure that out with you. So if you're worried about them, if you've noticed some of those signs or symptoms, simply observe and describe, notice and name, and then navigate. Get them some help. There are lots of reasonably accessible health options, mental health options for young people. I can't tell you what they are in your local area. You can do nothing worse than calling 1737, right? They should be able to direct you into the resources in your area. But each area, each different town, city will have its own particular resources for young people. But, you know, start with your local GP, start with your school counsellor, but do it with them. Don't dictate to them. So, that's what you need to be, really. You need to be a navigator, you need to be a supporter. You can't do it for them. So, flowing on from this a little bit, self-harming, cutting. It's not a pleasant subject, but we know lots of young people do it. So, it's a little bit of cold comfort, right? Great, my daughter's self-harming along with a whole lot of other kids. Is that great? No, it's not. Has it gone on for ages? Yes. Even there's references to it right back in the Bible about people self-harming. So is it something that's part of culture and society? Probably. Do we like it? No. Why do they do it? Why do they do it? That's always a question, right? The best understanding that we have about self-harming is it's a way of helping people control their emotions when they don't know what else to do. You talk to young people that self-harm and they'll say, you know what, it's better because I feel like I feel I've got a sense of control. I put the pain from the inside onto the outside. Now, is it the best way of emotional control? No, it's not. But that's why. Now, it's not necessarily an indication that they want to kill themselves. And I think that's really important to say. However, you do want to get help for them if they're doing that. And how do you do that? Well, go back to notice, name and navigate for a start off. But don't freak out. And I know that's really, really difficult. I can only imagine the distress if you found your son or your daughter hurting themselves. It's an incredibly difficult thing. I work with lots of young people who have engaged in this behaviour, and they don't like doing it either. They get incredibly distressed about it themselves. The harming might provide some temporary relief, but then they're often flooded with guilt and shame and sadness after it, and it gets into a big cycle. So try not to freak out. Your freaking out is not going to help the situation. And that may mean that you have to really get some supports for you. Share that load. Don't carry it by yourself. But don't freak out. Try as much as you can. Remember, at the end of last session, Margot and I had this sort of chat about, taking a deep breath, taking some time in the moment just to steel yourself. You might need really to do this here if you've found your young person engaged in some sort of self-harming. Empathise with them. Now, there's a twist here. Empathise with the feeling, not the action. You can say things like, man, you must have been so upset and so distressed to have done this. So you're not saying, oh, it's okay to do that. You don't want to give them that message, right? But you don't want to get all judgy on it. Well, that's a terrible thing to do. And that might be your initial reaction, right? You might react in anger or anxiety. But you shouldn't do that, stop it. Blah, blah, blah. They'll get the message from you that they can't tell you about this stuff because the immediate thing is they get judged. Well, I'm not going to talk to you about it. So, people, when they self-harm, are experiencing an incredible amount of interpersonal or inner distress. Recognise that. See past their behaviour. Look what's going on behind them, which again is, I guess, a guiding principle of this whole thing. Look behind the behaviour and see what's going on. And you can empathise with the emotion. Man, you must have been so upset. I've noticed that you're doing it. What can we do to help out? Notice, name, navigate. So remember the principle of navigation. And do get help. Now again, your young person might be reluctant to get help. There's shame, there's guilt, there's embarrassment. Ugh, I get that. Just gently keep at it. Gently keep at it. Again, notice, name, navigate. Who else in their life can they talk to if you're not the person that they can talk to easily about this stuff? And often as parents, unfortunately, it might not be us. And this is where the benefit of having somebody, your young person involved in like youth is really great, because there'll probably be some great youth mentors involved there that they can go and they may feel more comfortable talking to. Now again, you're going to have a conversation with your youth leader probably, right? Because they'll be freaking out too. But we can do this together. The point is we can navigate people to get some help for them, and there are options out there. So remember, don't freak out. Don't imagine the worst. Do empathise with the feelings, and do get some help. How do you get help? Notice, name, navigate. The navigator's doing it together with them, not you marching them off down to somewhere. Probably won't work. So, cutting self-harming. We'll change tack a bit now. You might even want to pause actually here. You might just need to pause and go, whew, okay, just need to get my head together, because we're kind of moving from something pretty heavy to something not quite so heavy. So I'll pause too. There you go. So I've unpaused now. Let's talk a little bit about social media and technology. If you're a parent and you're over the age of 35, you will probably talk about, well, we didn't have this in my day and it's ruining kids' brains and they're never getting off it and la la la. It's a thing. It's not going away. Cell phones, tablets, being online, it's here to stay. Interestingly, I can remember when I was growing up, and this was in the 80s, I can remember my brother being told off by my dad because my brother was inside too much, reading too many books. And I think now about how many parents would give their eye teeth for their kids to be reading books. But, back then, we were doing too much reading. So I don't know if teenagers can ever get it right for parents, right? They're always doing the wrong thing. They're watching too much TV. They're reading too much. They're not outside enough. They're outside too much. They're always home. They're never home. So, and I know people worry a lot about social media and technology. It's here to stay. Get familiar with it. Don't be like a grandmother going, oh, can you help? How do I do that? I didn't know I had a camera. Don't be grandma. Be a parent. You're going to have to get a little bit savvy yourself with devices. You can play a little bit of the fool at times. How do you get this working? And then your kids can show you and you go, oh, okay. Makes them feel good because then they're teaching you something, right? But you need to stay up to date with this kind of stuff as well. You're never going to be as up to date as them, but have a working knowledge of social media and technology. It is okay to have limits around this stuff though, okay? It's not just a free-for-all. There you go, have a phone, use it whenever you want. Have a laptop and have a tablet. Just use them whenever you want, I don't mind. Come on. Really useful limits. Amount of time. The amount of time they spend on screens goes up as they get older. Okay? Little kids, under 2s, Ministry of Health advises not to spend any time on screens. Now, find me a parent that doesn't ever show their under 2-year-old a screen. You know, you watch this, darling, while we try and have some sort of civilised conversation at this restaurant for at least 5 minutes. People do it all the time, right? There's no magical time limit on screens, and you will find that it gets more and more as teenagers get older. Part of that's education, right? Bring your own device. They're always on screens. During COVID-19, school took place via Zoom, via the internet, via Skype. Screens, right? So there's nothing inherently bad about screens. You want to give them some balance. You want to make sure that they're not always just spending all their time on screens. Get them outside a little bit, but there's sort of no precise number that I can say, yes, they should have 3.75 hours of screen time and no more. Figure it out, but try and get some balance in there. Particularly in the early stages of adolescence, see if you can keep the devices out of their room. Again, I recognise that as they get older, 15, 16, that's probably a battle that they'll increasingly do that. But think about good habits that you want to breed when they're even before they hit teenagehood. Have some. You don't need to be on your tablet in your room. You don't need to be on your laptop in your room. Make sure that there's a space that they can come out and feel that they can make their own in the sort of family area. But you don't want them necessarily being in their room on it all the time. And particularly, remember, nothing good happens on the internet after about 10 o'clock at night. Nothing good. Nothing at all. So you do not want them to have their devices in their room overnight. Make that a family rule. It's probably great for parents as well. We know that a phone or a device in your room can really interrupt with sleep. We know that for young people, lots of negative interactions happen at night on the internet, whether that's bullying, whether that's some sort of creepy, sort of grooming-y, sexualised behaviour. Nothing good. They do not need a phone or a tablet or a device in their room at night. Oh, but I use it for my phone. I use it for my alarm. Just buy them. Go to Kmart, go to the warehouse, buy like a $20, or a $10 digital alarm clock. There you go. You don't need it in your room anymore. Wow. So, that doesn't need to be in their room, out of their room. And if they've already got their device, this sort of, the horse is already bolted on this one, but if they're going to get a new device, a new phone or a new tablet or whatever, think about a contract. Who's paying for it? You are, probably, I imagine. So, here are some rules and some limits, just so that there's a very clear agreement. It's probably useful for you to have it as a parent clear in your head, because you might not have thought about it yourself. But have a contract with them. These are the rules. If I find bullying or inappropriate photos, whatever they might be, on your phone, you're going to lose it for a certain amount of time. Those are the rules. Okay? So set your rules and enforce them. Again, with a teenager, you probably have to do that in navigation. You'll probably have to do it together with them, but it's fine just to set those limits. You can use it as a GPS. Remember, it's got Find My iPhone on it. That might be a rule. Hey, if you're having this phone, it's always going to have the Find My iPhone app on, so I know where you are. Yep. Especially if they're going out and about. 15, 16 onwards. Well, we're going for a sleepover at Rachel's house. Okay, that's cool. I know how to contact you. I mean, obviously don't be creepy about it and stalk them, but it gives you that, you can use it as a bit of a GPS. And then thinking about social media. Remember the principles we talked about last time. Health, safety, and values. So apply those principles to their social media use. Is it a health issue? Well, probably not, unless they're on their device 24/7. Then it's a health issue. Is there a safety issue? I would argue possibly. 1 o'clock in the morning using your device, there might be some safety issues there, and there might be some values issue there. But think about how you can apply those principles to this particular thing, social media and technology. But get used to it. It's not going away anytime soon, even if you want it to. It's here to stay. So, social media and technology. Relationships. We're going to talk about two key groups for young people in relationships. Their peers and then you as parents. We'll come to that in a minute. Now, remember, going back to that first principle from last time, individuation, stepping away from the family and creating an identity for themselves. For young people, their peers, the people of their age, the same age, are really, really important to them. They are their key group. They will want to have relationships. Their opinion matters, not yours. Their opinion matters. Because remember, they're individuating. They're moving away from you as a family. So, we know that it's healthy and it's normal for young people to have to be spending lots of time with their people their same age. Remember, these happen virtually too. So we're in the 21st century. I can remember during lockdown, my daughter, she and her friends spent a lot of time online together. They were playing online games together, and I don't know how much of the games they were actually doing, but I could hear the chat. So they were just using that as a platform, if you like, to have social relationships. Keep them busy. Get them engaged and involved with things, clubs, groups, activities, where their interests lie, right? Don't sort of march them off to violin lessons if they really don't have any musical inclination at all. No, the psychologist said keep you busy, right? And I don't mean keep them busy doing chores. Fine to do chores, no problem with that. But keep them engaged and keep them active, keep them involved. I'd much rather you be rushing around having to be the taxi. Oh God, we've got to get to there. Than for you never to be taking them anywhere. It's a healthy sign if they're engaged in lots of activities. Find out what they really like and get them involved with that. Build role models into their life. Again, this is a great advertisement for youth because often young people look up to those who are slightly above them. So their role models might be somebody in their early 20s, not somebody who, like me, is in their very early stages of middle age. And get them involved with role models, and that might come through clubs and activities. If they play sports, they'll probably have role models and coaches or older players. If they're not sporty but they're into other activities, that and make sure that they're involved and engaged with groups of people where there are older people, slightly older, who they can look up to, who are going to speak some truth into their life and keep an eye on them. So youth is a great thing. You can see how youth on a Friday night taps into both of those things, right? It keeps them busy and it helps build role models. It's like I'm doing an ad for youth. Come along to youth on Friday night. So really useful thing. Helps them build relationships too because it's with other young people. The other relationships that are really important are young people's relationships with their parents. Now, of course, going back, remembering the developmental stage, at times it will feel like you're the last person they ever want to talk to. I can remember during lockdown that I had an increasing sense of intolerance for my 14-year-old's eye-rolling behaviour. Every time seemingly I breathed or moved, it would be like, ooh. But that's normal, right? Was she doing it any more than she usually did? I don't know. Was I less tolerant of it? Probably. But remember their developmental stage. This is what teenagers do. It's probably not about you. It's not them. They're not possessed by the devil that's making them do this. That's just what teenagers do. And you probably did it as a teenager too. I know we like to think that we're all perfect teens and that we just, did it really well and it was our parents that were wrong. But, go and talk to your parents. They'll probably tell you how much of a mess you were as an adolescent. So remember the developmental stage when you're trying to relate to them. I like this whole concept of car conversations, right? Teenagers aren't great about sitting down with you face to face. So, how's your day been? Tell me all about it. Yeah, oh, great. It's not going to happen, right? That's a very adult thing to do. And remember, they're pulling away from you as a parent, so you're kind of like, oh, get out. So get used to having these sort of, moments of conversations in the car when you're taking them somewhere. Again, a really good principle around this is one we referred to earlier, is the small lips and big ears. Just listen to them, chatter on. Sometimes, especially teenage girls, can just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. Sometimes I lose the will to keep going at times when they keep talking, but just be there, listening to them. It's like, oh yeah, cool. You do have to pay attention. Isn't that right, Dad? What? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You don't know what you've agreed to. But look for those sort of natural opportunities where you're together in some sort of space in a car, or you're taking them somewhere, that when they can just have that opportunity just to engage, to keep your relationship going with them. And remember, keep your cool. I haven't always been able to do that as a parent. I wish I had. But remember, going right back to the very start, this is not being about perfect, it's about being good enough. Try to keep your cool as much as you can. If you really feel like you are just going to explode or blow your top, get out. Go have a little bit of a break for yourself, because you really want to just be as cool and as calm as you can when you're interacting with them, because they can be very frustrating and they say silly things and you're going like, that's never going to happen. Because we know with teenagers that they have strong opinions about everything and they are very right all the time, which is incredibly frustrating. So you just have to practice breathing, taking some time out, keeping as cool as you can, and remember, they've only got half a brain. So, last thing to talk about, risk-taking. Unfortunately, it's part and parcel of being an adolescent. They will drive. They will drink, possibly, even if you don't want them to. They will get tattoos, even if you don't want them to. Might be in an environment where they're exposed to drug use. They might have tried it themselves. They might have a lot of piercings. So, that's part of it, right? So, do you want them to do any of these things? No. Probably not, I imagine. They're probably going to have to learn to drive. And I know that's a blessing, right? They learn to drive and they finally got their restricted license. It's like, yes, I don't have to ferry you around anymore. But it's part and parcel of them finding out the boundaries of life. Okay? Remember to go back to your guiding principles around risk-taking. Health, safety and values. Can I go to this party at a warehouse in the centre of town at midnight? Oh, I think that could be verging on a safety issue, right? So think about your guiding principles, remembering that they're going to engage in risky behaviours anyway. Try to put some containment around them. You're never going to remove all the risk. Think about who their friends are, who they're hanging out with. That's going to have a big influence on what they do. See previous comments about the importance of getting them involved in activities. Expect them to make mistakes. You know, if you've had to teach a teenager to drive, you know that it's natural for them to make mistakes, right? That's a really good opportunity to practice self-control. My son, can I testify that I'm just the calmest person in the world when we had driving lessons. I was just cool and calm all the time. Nothing threw me. So, expect them to make mistakes. Don't catastrophize. If the worst happens, let's say they come home drunk and they're 17. Oh my God. Is it the end of the world? No, it's not. Don't catastrophize about it. Do you want them to do that? No, of course you don't. But don't catastrophize about it, okay? They need that opportunity to learn and push the boundaries and learn for themselves. And when they have made a mistake, don't undercook or overcook the punishment. Okay? Undercooking is where you don't react to it at all. Well, that's lesson learned for you then, isn't it? Well, it might be. you might have to actually put some consequences in. But don't overcook the punishment. We know that both of those, undercooking or overcooking the punishment, so being too loose and too with your rules, or being too strict, both of those ends of the spectrum are actually associated with more difficult behaviours in kids. One, if you're too loose, because they don't have any sense of boundaries at all. And that's part of your job as a parent, is to be teaching them those boundaries. And if you're too strict, if they're locked down about everything, then they tend to rebel against that. So you don't want to overcook or undercook the punishment. But expect they'll make mistakes, expect they'll take risks, expect they'll stuff up, and just be okay with that. So, I'm going to leave you there for now. Think about the things that we've talked about today. If you've got any worries about your kids, remember, notice, name, navigate. Small lips, big ears. That seems to be one of the themes, right? And remember that you want to help them do that together with them. Don't try and impose your will over those. So, we'll leave it there. Good luck. What can you take from what we've talked about today and apply to your own situation? We've talked about a whole lot of different areas. What are some of the ones that have rung true or resonated for you? And is that something that might be your thing to work on this week? So, see you next time. Next time we're going to be talking about middle children, so that sort of age group, 7 to 12-year-olds. So, see you next time.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We've just finished our second session with teenagers with Dougal, and he talked about some really great things. There's some keys to help us get through the challenges that we're facing, that some of us face with our teenagers. One of the things you talked about, which was quite key, was noticing, naming, and navigating.
Yeah.
You know, for some parents, they'll struggle to talk on that level with their teenagers. So, so can you sort of like give us an example, or almost like a role play of talking to a teenage girl or a teenage boy who won't come out of their room? You've noticed they're grumpy, or a girl who seems a lot sadder. What are the actual words or things that you can use?
I think you've just said them.
Right.
I noticed that you haven't been coming out of your room a lot, and that you seem a lot sadder.
No.
And I noticed that you're sort of less talky than you used to be.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then
remember that pause. Yeah, remember that pause.
Yeah.
Also, I think the important thing is don't look for a miracle solution.
Right.
Like, it's not going to be. Life is not like a TV movie where suddenly they're going to have this massive sort of, oh my God, yes, I'm so glad you noticed.
It's not Little House on the Prairie.
It's not Little House on the Prairie.
You're old enough to remember.
With Laura Ingalls Wilder, isn't it? No, it's not. So you might have to come back to that.
Right.
Think about right time, right place, right person. If you guys if you've just told your daughter off because she didn't do the dishwasher, it's probably not the right time to then go, oh, I noticed you've been more grumpy. It's like, no kidding.
Yeah.
So think about the right time, the right place, not when your friends are there, not late at night probably, the place might be in the car, going back to our idea about car conversations, and the right person. If you've tried it a couple of times and it's not working and you're still worried, then maybe that's the time to get some help.
Okay, gotcha.
Maybe it's the other parent. Maybe it's somebody in the wider whānau. Maybe it's a youth leader or somebody else in your wider sort of group. And who is it that they kind of connect with?
Yeah.
But it's more a sort of a gentle repeating rather than this is not sort of an intervention where suddenly somebody's going to break down after one conversation with you and tell you everything that's going on.
Yeah.
It'll be hard work, and you probably have to come back to it, and you'll think you've stuffed it up and it doesn't go very well, but just go back, because that's life and that's what happens.
Yeah. Oh, that's great, Dougal. So just keep trying, find the right time and place, and things will open up. So that's really cool. Now this year, obviously 2020, it went viral. Sorry. Okay. COVID and anxiety for children. It's been massive, children and teens. Can you just explain why, though?
Well, in some ways it's pretty natural, right? And in fact, we want people to be a little bit anxious. So if you think about anxiety, naturally anxiety is a response to a threat. Now, when we start dealing with it in a sort of a mental health context, it's often because the anxiety is occurring without a threat, right? And it's like, why are you anxious? There's nothing to be anxious about, right? But anxiety and COVID, we actually want people to feel a little bit anxious because there is this virus that could make you really sick or kill you. And that anxiety will likely, hopefully, propel you to do a new behaviour. Wash your hands, wear a mask, cough into your elbow, keep away from... That's anxiety driven, that's good. So there are some natural cues that probably have enhanced people's anxiety. And we know definitely that young people experience much higher levels of that. I think around that, most young people who've experienced a high level of anxiety that will probably drop down again. You might have noticed that yourself. Actually, and I know here in Auckland that you had 2 lockdowns. We didn't. But after you might have noticed up and down in waves. But then it sort of slowly ebbed away. Now, but also for a smaller proportion of young people, that might have been the trigger that actually started a more serious anxiety problem. Right. And if that's the case, if you've noticed that anxiety is continuing on longer, everybody else seems to have sort of settled down a bit, but they're still anxious, that's probably the time to do the notice, name and navigating and start getting them some professional assistance. And that could be as simple as going to your GP. That's a good place to start. But again, notice, name, zip your lip, have those big ears.
Yeah, thank you. That's great advice. Just want to finish now with sort of a different type of a question, but it is something that I've noticed. Sure. As an older sort of mum, my kids are growing, is that the whole, it used to be helicopter parenting, but now there's this snowplow parenting thing that people talk about where your parents are not under-involved, they're too involved, and they're removing so many obstacles so that their kids don't ever kind of have to struggle with stuff.
Yeah. Look, firstly, I think it's natural, right? As a parent, your best intentions are to protect your child and to help them in the world. And as a parent myself, I don't want ever my kids to suffer. And think about that developmental stage. That developmental stage for kids is just as important for adults. There's a time when you have to let them go. Think about that analogy I used in the talk before about helping them to ride a bike. You can't run around for your entire life holding on to the back of their bike. They've now got a scooter. They're now 17 and they've got their own scooter, and you're still running along behind them holding the back of the scooter. It's all right. Daddy's got you. Daddy's got you. You're going to have to just take your hands off. And that's a brave move. And it goes against the grain as a parent. So as a parent, you feel anxious, you worry, you love your kids, you want the best for them, and so you want to stay involved and protect them. But there's a time when you actually just have, and that's, as a parent, that's a time when you need support. Because this is hard. This is like, whoa, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. It makes me feel, I don't know where they are. Yeah. And that's so I think be kind to yourself and recognise firstly that it's a natural instinct and you're sort of kicking against the grain a little bit. And at the same time, balance that with, we have to do this. I can't be running behind you, holding on to the back of your scooter when you're 17 years old saying, Daddy's got you, Daddy's got you. It's all right, darling. Yeah. You have to let them go at some stage. And that's hard, and there's a bit of a tearing away. But I think just being aware of that and realising that that's normal and getting your own supports as a parent. Talking to other parents with teams. Have you done teams? Have you done this? Oh, God, I can remember doing that when our kids were little. And you often have I think they're called pin groups, plunk it in your neighbourhood or something like that, where you get together and say, how much is your baby sleeping? And you kind of go, oh, great, I'm doing better than you. Yeah. But that sort of fades away over time. But we should almost have, parenting groups for teens or parent support groups for teens because it's hard. It is. So find your network. Maybe you're in an e-group. Maybe you've just got some really good friends. Share that journey together, and because that's community, right?
Yeah.
That's us living in community together, helping each other, supporting each other, and don't feel you have to do it alone. And notice that some of it, that's hard sometimes, and I need some help.
Yeah, that's such great advice. That's so true, isn't it? That's one of the great things about being in a church family, is that you've got people around that know your kids, that love them.
Absolutely.
And yeah, you can take your hands off and trust God too. In
Yeah,
some
yeah,
ways,
yeah, absolutely,
You can trust God that
absolutely, yeah,
He's
for
got
sure.
them, and what you've planted inside will bear fruit.
Yeah.
It might sort of be stunted little fruit to start with, but
It'll be,
we get there because we have faith, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we'll finish there, and so I think a bit of homework would be around thinking about noticing, naming, and navigating.
Yeah. You might want to practice that. Like, how we just did a practice of what words would you actually use. It's not a silly thing.
Yeah.
And just practice, and it'll feel awkward. Write it down, just, how do I actually say? Or just talk it out with somebody else. I've noticed that she is this or that, or I've noticed that he is doing that. Just finding the words. So have a little bit of a practice before you need to do it.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, guys.
Cool.
We'll see you soon.